The construction sector very much is at the forefront of solving climate change or tackling climate change at the very least. What does that sort of processing or repurposing look like for a material as challenging as concrete? Do these materials have value?
Yeah, concrete is very specific, to be honest. And
what do the prices look like for the materials that you take out of these buildings?
so what we're doing is we're going to the building owner. We're saying like,
Hey, Dominik, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
yeah, hi, nice to meet you. And thanks a lot for the invitation.
Perfect. We're here today to talk about construction waste and how phenomenally huge of a challenge this is. And before we do that, why don't you just take a second to introduce yourself and the work that you do?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to introduce myself. So I'm Dominik. I'm one of the co-founders of Concular. And what we are doing with Concular is we enable circular construction. And this with around 70 people right now, focusing right now on the German-speaking market. So Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And what we created is really an ecosystem. So meaning that we support building owners, architects, but also manufacturers, that materials which are in buildings are getting again into a material loop, so saving a lot of resources, CO2, and with that, of course, also a lot of money.
So we know that construction as a sector is pretty bad for the use of materials and then what we then do with those materials, maybe when we no longer need them. I mean, from where you're standing, how bad is this issue?
Yeah, actually, there's huge numbers you can say there, because what you can actually say is the construction sector is the largest polluter in the world by far. So 60% of all waste which we produce is coming from the construction sector. So you have to think about, like, we are recycling in our households. That is just a fraction of the whole waste. And only the construction sector is making that much amount. And there's, of course, other industry which are adding to that. Right now, there's no real recycling or anything in the construction sector. And then another big number is actually 40% of the GHG emissions are also coming from that sector. And so far, when we talked about sustainability in the construction sector, we actually talked about energy efficiency, and that's good. But if you really look into the numbers, you can see that half of these GHG emissions, so 20% of all GHG emissions, are coming from the construction of the production of construction materials, meaning that like a lot of CO2 is actually in the production. And the reason for that is the so-called take, make, waste model. So we take resources out of our earth, we produce materials, we put them into buildings. And sometimes after just a couple of years, we take these really good quality materials and we are landfilling them or we downcycling them. Right now, only 1% of materials are really reused and only a fraction is recycled. And that's why I'm often say, if we want to tackle climate change, we have to look at the construction sector. So climate change is decided on the construction side. This is what you can say. And this is why there's such a big pressure to change that and to make here something which is in the end creating material loops.
I absolutely agree. The construction sector very much is at the forefront of solving climate change or tackling climate change at the very least. The scale of materials feeding into the production of new infrastructure, of new developments, etc., is phenomenal. So I want to break it down a little bit more. Mm-hmm. When we refer to materials within the construction sector, we're talking about concrete, steel, other materials. Is that the list, or what does that spectrum look like?
Yeah, you can actually prioritize them. By concrete is by far the largest polluter. So if you look at GHG emission, it's around 9% of global GHG emissions. Putting that into context, the whole aviation sector, so not only private, but also like packages and whatever, is 3%. So now you have to imagine how much in the news in our society do we talk about flying and having flight shaming, and how much do we actually talk about the production of concrete? So although it's 3 times more CO2, if you rank that by countries, it would be US, China, concrete production. That's just to give you the scale. And then afterwards, steel with 7%, and then we have glass, we have gypsum. So there's not only the GHG emissions, but it's also the resource intake. It's like a huge resources. The second most used resource on our earth is sand. And it's because of the production of concrete. So it's water and then sand. And that's why we have to do there something. And actually putting that also there into perspective, the best thing to do is to not demolish anymore, to keep buildings as they are, because right now we are demolishing too many buildings. Saying that for Germany, around 20,000 buildings are demolished every year, only in Germany, and most of the time there's actually no need, but we're just doing it. And I think there's also a lot of, not only about reusing and recycling materials, but there's also a lot of opportunity of just critically question if we really have to demolish buildings or infrastructure, or can renovate them, and with that also save a lot of resources.
What is the current approach to buildings and their materials? How easily can we come up with a good understanding of what is actually in there?
Yeah, you would think of having a lot of information about materials in buildings. So especially large buildings, they might have like hundreds of millions of euro of value, right? You put there, I don't know, some developments, 500, 600 million euros of construction costs. And then you would think, okay, if you invest so much money, you should also know what materials are in. Reality looks very different. So in 90% of the cases, the documentation of materials in buildings is gone after 1 year. After 1 year, you don't know what's in a building anymore. And that's a big issue, because when then there's a deconstruction happening, the first person who's really seeing what's in a building is the deconstruction company when it's starting with deconstruction. And it is far too late, because there's massive amounts of materials and they have little time to remove all the stuff. So they will not start off selling the materials or find good ways. They just put it on a landfill because it's faster, it's easier, and it's also cheaper, because of course they cannot store the materials just of the risk that they will not sell it and so on. So yeah, the reality is we just don't know what's in building. And that's actually the key element which we identified has to change to be able to create a circular construction system, or to basically create a material loop.
So this idea of a material loop, and going back to the concept of material recycling, do materials have value, or is concrete, are we still yet to be able to develop a loop available for materials like concrete?
We have a big lack of information about materials in buildings, and this is what we identified. And on the other side, like we said, like, why can we not just take a brick from the one building and put this brick in another building? Yeah, that was basically like the founding element of Concular. And so what we then realized is, okay, we have to know what's in buildings. And that's why we created basically a software with which you can go into buildings before the deconstruction happens. So we go at that point when they know that the deconstruction happened in the building, we digitize all the materials. And what we then do is to match this supply of materials in the future with the demand of it by manufacturers or by a new building or new building plannings and so on. And with that, we are able then to close the material loop. So we sell that. And then when the deconstruction happens, we tell the deconstruction company, these are materials which are already sold. Please take it out in a way that they are not getting damaged. And this principle then allows us to go from 1% reuse to 30, 40, 50%. We also already had 90% and so on. And now the interesting thing, what is happening is actually, so as a building owner, when you deconstruct a building, so you have, let's say your building is 5 million euros and you account in that you will have €500,000 of deconstruction costs. But if you're using Concular, like this methodology, what happens now is that for what you had to pay for the landfilling before is getting now a value, because you get money for something which you considered as waste before. So we make out of a cost block, value block, something really valuable.
So materials like concrete, so we know that concrete is is a fundamental issue in the world that we live in. What does that sort of processing or repurposing look like for a material as challenging as concrete?
Yeah, concrete is very specific, to be honest. And to be honest, we don't have a good solution for concrete right now, because concrete also is like the largest emitter. The best way to tackle concrete is to keep the building. And because very often the structure of a building is done by concrete. And so the best way is here to keep the structure. Reusing is partly possible, but normally not very easy and not very economically feasible. And so it's very important to keep it. Also, the recycling of concrete is not That's economically feasible. However, recycled concrete has an impact in terms of CO2 reduction. So you can see in the end it has the same CO2 as new concrete. So we also not take care about that. However, there's a lot of other materials. Looking at steel, for example, steel beams can be reused. There's also like a standard which is now getting revised, which has a guideline on what steps do you have to take to reuse steel beams. So standardization is also having a big role in that. But something which we, for example, sell a lot is bricks. Bricks is an easy material, a lot of brick buildings. So we are selling around 2 to 3 million bricks from buildings. Also, for example, we have right now a development of 16 stories in Hamburg, which will be the largest building in the world with a facade only from reclaimed bricks. Also, you can save a lot of money. So you're talking about partition walls, talking about raised floors and so on. So these are materials which are quite easy because very often they are already modular and they are looking like new. You cannot see that they are reclaimed, and the client is happy, and you can save like 30% of costs and around 80 to 90% of GHG emissions.
On the point around costs, what do these costs look like for, say, your example of bricks? You spoke before about how you've solved that commercial challenge. What do the prices look like for the materials that you take out of these buildings?
So normally, if you have a brick building, you would go to the construction company or demolition companies, and you would pay the demolition company to take care about the bricks. They would put it to a landfill and so on. So what we're doing is we're going to the building owner. We're saying like, we will deconstruct the building for you and you will not pay anything. So basically, these companies are specialized. There's two ways of taking out the bricks. Either you take the wall, you let it fall down. So that's the easiest way. And then around 20 to 30% of the bricks, they will break. But around 70 to 80% of the bricks are still in a really good shape, and you can put them on pallets and then you can sell them. So you still have a waste of 20 to 30%, but you have really good bricks which you can sell then. And the other way is, of course, to put, scaffolding around the building and then take it brick by brick. That takes more time, but then you have almost 90 to 95% of good bricks. Depends a lot on the situation, how large the building is and so on. But in the end, so the building owner is saving the deconstruction costs. We, of course, have costs of engaging these companies, which are only doing this every day. So they are quite efficient in their work. And then we, of course, put a margin on the bricks and sell them. And they're around the same price, sometimes even more expensive than new bricks. But the reason why they are more expensive is not because of the cost, but because these kind of bricks, especially if they're old bricks, you cannot find on the market anymore. So people are willing to pay more, sometimes double the price as new bricks, because they have a certain look which you cannot get anymore from new bricks. And I think that's something then which, of course, is quite good for us.
So do you think that this is the answer to the big challenge, this monumental challenge around material reuse? Do you think this marketplace type environment enabling more efficient demand and supply, do you think that this is the answer to the challenge around wastage?
So that's a good question. So I think circular construction is definitely the answer to reduce GHG emissions. There are studies saying like around 13% of global GHG emissions can be reduced by reusing or high value recycling of construction material. So the specific concept is like the concept which is Concular doing. Is this the ultimate solution? I think it's a good first step. And so the most important things is actually regulation and standards. So right now, regulation only knows new material. There is actually nothing such as reclaimed materials in law. That changes right now. There's a lot of regulative initiative also in the UK, like in London, which is trying to introduce reclaimed materials and make it much easier to reintroduce them. I think companies like Concular, there should be much more of them, but I think the biggest player, or like the ones who can really change that, is the manufacturers. Because if you look, we have now a linear system, and it starts by the manufacturers and it ends at the landfill. But what actually has to happen is that the landfill, or actually the part before, so the building, has to be connected back to the manufacturer to make it a loop. And so the manufacturers have to establish take-back systems. The manufacturers have to see the opportunity that they are taking back their own materials. And I think this is where the future lies. So really establish take-back system by manufacturers. And this is also where we think with Concular we want to be. So in the end, we want to show the transparency. Where are the materials from the manufacturers? So either we take care and we give them back to them, or they can take care about their own take-back systems. And I think this is where we ultimately going to. And so landfills will not exist anymore, and deconstruction or demolition companies, as we know them right now, they will also not exist anymore. So we will cancel them out, and we are taking and we're closing the loop from the building directly to the manufacturers.
Do you think there's much of an evolution required for developers in the way that they approach maybe the design and development of these buildings?
Yeah, I think it's quite, for developers, there's a lot of opportunity in that actually. On the one side, there is a need, because if you look at the taxonomy for sustainable finance or getting any money on the financial market, there's now sustainability requirements, and circular construction or circularity will be one of the big requirements. So if you don't take care about that anymore, or not yet, and you want to sell your asset in 5 or 10 years, it will be a stranded asset because you didn't take care about that. And I think this is a big risk you have to address. Now, creating like material passports of your buildings, which you can do with Concular, is very important. But also, talk to your planners that they apply circular principles, meaning that they are putting in materials in a way that it can be deconstructed very easily, is very important. And that will also have an effect on the value of the building, because so this is also something which we calculate. It's called material residual value, meaning that we can calculate how much money can you actually make if you sell these materials instead of landfill it, and that you can put on the value of the building, so you can increase the overall value of your building. And I think this is again an opportunity for the project developers. However, as a project developer, I don't want to take care about the details of circular construction, because I have to take care about 500 other things. So what is missing right now in the market is one, or like the service, like circular construction as a service. So one company is reducing the complexity for me. And this is actually where we position as Concular. So project developers are going to us, because when they work with us, they don't have to take care about any detail anymore, because we are just make their whole building circular, and that's fine. And I think in other countries, there must be much more companies doing like that, because right now a project developer has to go to a company who's digitizing that, then a company who is selling that, then a company who's deconstructing that, and so on. And a project developer don't want to take care about that. They want to just buy the solution and not like 5 different companies.
Developers must love you. You're saving them money on demolition costs. You're help potentially providing resource to be able to actually get the work done, but also then provide them with access to materials. It sounds like a good combination, right?
Yeah, so we are quite happy to have good partners, saying it like that way. So in Germany, we work with the largest project developers, public and private. So also like the big cities. And on the other side, of course, like with the big asset holders, with the big developers. Yeah, I think it's a win situation for everyone except of landfills, but they are owned by like the cities or municipalities. Yeah. They also don't want to have more waste. At least in Germany, landfills are getting closed everywhere. I think it's a good time to have the solution. And yeah, definitely, especially nowadays where project developers have to look at every cent, they are really like solutions like Concular.
Bad time to be a landfill.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's it. Hey, Dominik, thank you so much. This has been such a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate it. I'm so excited to see a world where waste may potentially still occur, but at least one person's waste will be another person's new materials for their shiny new building.
Exactly.
I'm really excited to see you continue to grow. Thank you for your time.
It was great to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.